how much Bitcoin do you need to retire, and to retire well, right? Be able to have the freedom that you want. I want to go through that here today, and we're going to go through a lot of different examples, different places that you could live, different ways that you could live, whether you want to just not really have to save anymore for retirement, you can just kind of coast, or whether you want to be filthy rich, retire on a yacht. We'll talk about all that in today's video. And again, we'll be going over some different assumptions, some different price targets for Bitcoin, where Bitcoin might be in the future. So you can kind of gauge it. However bullish you are, you can look and see, okay, I think Bitcoin's going to hit this number in 10 years. I think I need this amount of Bitcoin to live how I want to live. We're going to be going through a lot. If you don't mind, hit subscribe. Turn on the bell notification underneath the video so you can see future videos just like this. A lot of people seem to like these videos. I've done them in the past, but it's been months since I did a Retire on Bitcoin video, so I thought it was about time for another one. There's also going to be a link to Margex underneath the video in case you want to start trading cryptocurrencies, which is more of a short-term approach, a way to amplify returns. There is a link to Margex underneath the video. They just debuted their Margex 2.0 system, so they actually just revamped their website. They added some new things, but you can try trading cryptocurrency underneath the video. It's not right for everyone, and I want to make sure that you understand the risks that go into leverage trading. There are some videos on my channel where you can learn more. There's also going to be a link to CoinW underneath the video as well. Both of these websites don't have KYC. I guess another way to put it, neither of these websites have KYC, which means you don't have to put in a lot of personal information. Now, over the last couple months, we've seen a lot of buying from large institutions, from ETFs. We've also seen wallets that have just been swallowing up Bitcoin. For example, this wallet, Mr. 100, you can see how much Bitcoin they bought on certain days. So if we go just to the 29th of March, 100 Bitcoin, 200, 40, 44, all these buys are within the last 1 week of me recording this video. They bought almost 3,000 Bitcoin. We're also getting smaller companies. Like this was just announced. The Kansas City Cattle Company has now adopted Bitcoin as a primary reserve treasury asset. The debilitating loss in purchasing power combined with increases in costs in our industry have made this one of the easiest decisions they've ever made. Fix the money, fix the food. So there are a lot of people buying Bitcoin. We know that it's done extremely well throughout this year so far. And we also know that it's done extremely well over the last year. So not just starting in 2024, but over the last year and a half since the bottom, Bitcoin went from 15,000 all the way up to 74,000. Now we're seeing a bit of a pullback, but that's why I think it's important to look again and see, okay, what are your goals? And I like making videos like this. I like making videos where I say like, you have to buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin or something like that. Because while the goals are a bit arbitrary because we don't know where Bitcoin's going to go in price, it does get you focused on the long term, and setting arbitrary goals does help. Just like if you're in the weight room and you're bench pressing, and let's say you bench press 95 pounds. If your goal is 100, which it probably would be, it's not like anything drastically changes when you hit 100 pounds on your bench press. You just go on to the next goal, right? But it does help push you. So that's why we're going to go through this here today. Now, to be clear, this is how much you would need to retire based on different assumptions. We have to talk about the assumptions because you can make numbers say whatever you want if you mess with the assumptions. So I'm going to go through them. But I will say too, I don't think it's smart to only invest in Bitcoin, right? I think it's important to have diversification. So yeah, you might not have enough Bitcoin to retire just off Bitcoin. Maybe you don't even want to sell your Bitcoin. But if you did, those are the numbers we're going to be going through today. Hopefully you have some stocks or some real estate, something else too that can provide you some income in retirement. All right, so let's go through some different assumptions. The safe withdrawal rate is going to be 4%. This is based on traditional finance, which basically says if you have a portfolio of $1 million, you should be able to withdraw $40,000 a year for retirement. And this allows you to withdraw without the underlying portfolio really going down in value because the rest of the portfolio appreciates. Now, this is not perfect because sometimes you have down years right at the beginning when you start drawing on your portfolio. And depending on how volatile your asset is, this can really change the results. For example, if you were guaranteed 7% and you withdrew 4%, well, obviously you're always going to have a surplus. But if you have something that's very volatile and it goes down 90% and then goes up 900%, well, if you time that wrong and you withdraw when it's down 90%, well, you're going to withdraw a lot more of the overall portfolio at that point. But we don't have really a lot of studies on this for Bitcoin. Really, your safe withdrawal rate would have been probably much higher than 4% for Bitcoin because it's appreciated so much. It's gone up like about 50% a year, 50. But we're just going to say the safe withdrawal rate is 4%. And then we're going to go into some different scenarios. How do you want to retire? So we're going to assume that your cost of living in the United States, which we'll go through some other countries, is $70,000. I realize that's a lot less than some people spend. I realize it's a lot more than other people spend. But we're going to say $70,000. We're going to say lean FIRE is $60,000. So FIRE means financial independence, retire early, which basically says, this is the movement of people that want to save as much as possible and retire young. So lean FIRE is basically like, okay, I'm going to cut back on my expenses. Maybe I'm not going to go out to eat as much, but then I can finally retire and walk away from my day job. So we're going to say lean FIRE, you're spending less than the cost of living, even like less than a normal person would spend. So you're going to spend only $60,000 in this scenario. Traditional FIRE, which is traditional financial independence, retire early, we're going to say is around $105,000. I'm going to say it's 1.5 times the cost of living, because if you're retiring early, you probably want to have like some money to go travel, to have a nice house, that kind of thing. So we're going to assume you spend $105,000 a year in retirement. Fat FIRE is spending a lot of money, like you're living fat, meaning you are living well. We're going to assume that you spend twice as much as traditional FIRE. And then filthy rich FIRE. This is something that I created. It is that you're filthy rich. You can pretty much do whatever you want within reason. I mean, you're not buying a private jet, but it's 10 times that of the cost of living. So you're living pretty much however you want. You can have a couple houses that are millions of dollars, most likely at this point. You can drive really fancy cars. You can go on vacation. You can pay for your kids to have private school, all that kind of stuff. That's almost $1 million a year. So then the question is, what's the price of Bitcoin going to be? We're going to assume this is 10 years out. So you want to retire in 10 years? Okay. How high is Bitcoin going to be? It's impossible to know. Anyone that tells you that they know where Bitcoin's going to go is lying, or you're misunderstanding what they're saying, because a lot of people will say like Bitcoin could go to this. ARK Invest says Bitcoin's going to $3.4 million. I've seen other people like Mark Moss talk about $43 billion, I think, basically saying, okay, what's all the value in the world? It's all going over to Bitcoin. So there are people that will say that Bitcoin is going to be worth billions and billions of dollars, or tens of millions of dollars, all different kinds of numbers. We're going to assume nothing. We're going to make you assume, I'm going to make you assume the price of Bitcoin in 10 years. Maybe you think Bitcoin's just going to be $100,000. Now, if you're watching this video, you're probably bullish on Bitcoin. I realize Bitcoin can be below $100,000 in 10 years. It's possible, like mathematically, it's possible. But if you're watching this video, you're probably bullish about Bitcoin. Typically, we see Bitcoin go up 50% a year. It's not perfect. Some years are down. Some years are way up. But that's been like the average appreciation. And yeah, we're already at $66,000 at the time of this recording. We've been at 74. So $100,000 I think is pretty bearish for 10 years from now. $250,000. That's where a lot of people think we would be at the end of this cycle. When you just look at the previous cycle, high, $69,000. The high before that was about $20,000. So we did about 3.5x. A 3.5x from $70,000 or $69,000, the last high, would be around $245,000. So if we have a similar cycle top, we would be right around $250,000. But that's like in the next year, year and a half. We're talking 10 years down the line. So I still think this is bearish, but it's still a really good return if you're just looking at traditional finance. Like, okay, this is a 4x. A 4x on your money in 10 years in traditional finance is really good. The index funds go up they about double every 10 years. So That would be kind of another bearish estimate, but better. $500,000 right in the middle. I think this would be putting Bitcoin's market cap right under that of gold, but gold's price now, gold's market cap now. So if gold appreciates by 3% a year, okay, this is still well under, Bitcoin's price is still well under the market cap of gold. $1 million, obviously a big round number. A lot of people talk about $1 million Bitcoin by 2030. This is a little bit more bullish, obviously, and then $2 million just because I don't want to put in a $5 or $10 million estimate. I think $1 million Bitcoin would be right around the price of gold. Again, if gold appreciates 3% a year, something like that, in 10 years, it would be right around the market cap of gold. And then obviously $2 million would be if gold appreciates 3% a year, well, Bitcoin goes and doubles gold. Now, how would we get here? It's a little bit beyond the scope of this video, but okay, we have passive flows from ETFs coming in all the time, right? We have large companies like BlackRock and Fidelity starting to include these kinds of Bitcoin ETFs in retirement portfolios. We already know that they're putting these ETFs in other portfolios like the Strategic Income Opportunities Fund and the Global Allocation Fund. So they start putting it into more portfolios, which means it's being bought up. These Bitcoin ETFs are then buying up the Bitcoin off the market. There's not really that much Bitcoin on exchanges to be sold. There's not that many people that are selling Bitcoin compared to what we've seen in the past. Now, of course, most people have a price that they're willing to sell at, but a lot of entities have said that they're just going to continue to buy Bitcoin forever. We know retirement accounts are going to add Bitcoin. We know pension funds. Some pension funds are already buying Bitcoin. We know sovereign wealth funds are most likely going to be buying Bitcoin too. So when you look at all the available money that's looking for a place to be, looking for something to buy, and then you look at how little Bitcoin there is to actually buy and how inelastic the supply is, it's not like they're going to go print more of it. They're not going to go mine more Bitcoin because there's more demand. No, there's a fixed amount of Bitcoin. So supply and demand. Supply stays the same. Demand goes way up. Price goes way up. So yeah, that's how we can hit some of these numbers. But let's go into how much Bitcoin you need. I think I've been talking enough about the assumptions. Okay, let's say Bitcoin only hits $100,000 in this first scenario. How much Bitcoin do you need? Well, for Coasting Fire, spending about, well, I didn't cover Coasting Fire, honestly. This is basically that you're going to hold on to the Bitcoin, right? You're going to buy Bitcoin for the next 10 years or something, and then you're going to get a 10% compounded annual growth rate after 2034, and you're going to do this for 15 years. So basically, okay, I want to invest as much as possible for the next 10 years, and I'm just going to hold it for 15 years after that. How much Bitcoin do I need? In this scenario, you need about 6.3 Bitcoin. Again, this is like maybe you want to go part-time at your job, so you just want to save as much money as possible for the next 10 years. Then you go part-time. You don't invest anything. You just sit on your laurels or you sit on your bags and then just wait. So you need about 6.3 Bitcoin. Lean Fire, so not living super expensively, you need about 15 Bitcoin. Traditional Fire, 26.25. Fat Fire, 52.5. Filthy Rich Fire, 175 Bitcoin. And you're sitting there thinking, there's no way I'm hitting 175 Bitcoin. There's no way I'm hitting 26 Bitcoin. Even 15 is incredibly hard. And I don't blame you. This is not a super bullish scenario here, right? This is Bitcoin's price going up 50% in 10 years. This is actually less than the S&P 500 goes up. This is less than index funds go up. So this is the bearish scenario, right? If you need to spend $105,000 and we're using a 4% with safe withdrawal rate, that means that you need a portfolio that's like $2.5 million. And if Bitcoin is only $100,000, well, yeah, you need 25, 26 Bitcoin to be able to retire on those numbers. That's just how the numbers work out. But what if Bitcoin goes up more than that? That's a question, right? Bitcoin probably won't be $100,000 in 10 years. You can go into all different kinds of numbers here. You know, we have 25 different numbers on this list. Let's go to $500,000 Bitcoin. You want to spend $105,000 a year. Maybe I should have just put $100,000, but we're going off the 50% higher than the cost of living in the US. Okay, $500,000 Bitcoin. You need about 5.25 Bitcoin. Okay, that makes sense, right? That would put you at about $2.6 million in Bitcoin, 2.625, I think. So you'd be worth over $2.5 million just from your Bitcoin. You can withdraw $100,000 a year of your Bitcoin. So you sell, I don't know, a fifth of a Bitcoin every single year. And hopefully the rest of the Bitcoin continues to appreciate. We're going to assume that Bitcoin keeps on appreciating, maybe 10% or something, just like the rest of the market after 2034. But if you want to live a little bit more expensively, if you wanted 3 times the cost of living or double that of fire, okay, well, how do you do that? Okay, well, you need 10.5 Bitcoin. At $500,000, that gives you $5 million. Again, 4% withdrawal rate, you take about $210,000 out a year. What if Bitcoin hits $1 million? $2 million. Let's go to $2 million. Let's say Bitcoin's $2 million. It would be 30 trillion? $30 trillion in market cap, if I'm doing my math right, somewhere around there. 30 trillion, 40 trillion. So very large, but not unbelievable, right? If you are very bullish on Bitcoin, maybe this is too bullish for you. But let's say Bitcoin hits $2 million and you want to live very expensively. Keep in mind, we're not accounting for taxes or inflation. Those are going to be coming into play, but everyone has different tax rates. Everyone has different assumptions on inflation. But let's say you want to spend 700 grand a year. Well, you need about 8.75 Bitcoin at $2 million a pop. You'd be able to spend 700,000, assuming the 4% safe withdrawal rate. Okay, but still, this is too expensive for a lot of people, right? Maybe you want to just do lean fire, maybe traditional fire, maybe you have just like one Bitcoin. Okay, well, you can get by, right? You can retire on that one Bitcoin at $2 million. But let's scooch over. What if you want to live somewhere else? Okay, we're going to go to Australia. Australia, the cost of living is actually a little bit lower than in the US. When I looked it up last, it was about $52,000. That lowers all your numbers. So let's say Bitcoin hits 500,000 and you want to retire. We're going to use the same assumptions that traditional fire is 1.5 that of the cost of living. You need about 3.87 Bitcoin compared to 5.25. Well, there are other places though that you can retire for cheaper. I mean, we could look at Southeast Asia, but let's look at Mexico. Same thing, cost of living, pretty low. This is for a family of 4, $35,000. Okay. If we have 1.3 Bitcoin, we can retire with, what is that, double? Yeah, 1.5x. 1.5x the cost of living. So you have a slightly nicer home. You can spend more on cars, stuff like that. If we have a $1 million Bitcoin, it takes 1.3 Bitcoin to retire traditional fire there. Now, again, if you want to spend triple the cost of living, right? Maybe you want to live on like in a beach town or something like that. 2.6 Bitcoin. So you would have $2.61 million worth of Bitcoin. Take 4% that a year. Okay. You take out 100 grand. Live on a beach town, right? In Mexico. And how expensive is this? Where do you start? Okay. Well, let's look at some of the numbers right now, because the numbers here might kind of freak you out. Like how easy this would have been in the past versus now. Okay, so the cost today, we're looking at a $66,000 Bitcoin. By the time you watch this, who knows where Bitcoin is? A lot of people watch these videos months after I post them. Right now, the cost of traditional fire, if Bitcoin hits 500,000, so like this scenario here, the cost of 5.25 Bitcoin is about $346,000. You might be saying that's really expensive, and I'd be saying, yeah, that is really expensive. You're still talking about retiring and drawing 100 grand a year. Even if the asset goes up 7x, like it's still expensive. It's not like you can put $10 into Bitcoin and retire. But if you do this in a smart fashion, if you dollar cost average, it can be much easier. So one of the last times I made this video was October 18. Back then, the price of Bitcoin was $28,000. I've been doing this for years, and I've been talking about this for years, how you could do it. It was much cheaper then. So the same scenario where you need that 5.25 Bitcoin, instead of $346.5 thousand, it was under $150,000. It was much easier. And before that, if you had been dollar cost averaging, or if you had just bought during the bottom of the bear market, instead of $150,000 or $350,000, it was $81,000 if you could have bought at that $15,500 mark, or if you bought at the bottom of the bear market before that. You could see here, $16,800 for this traditional fire at $500,000 Bitcoin. You could have lived Fab Fire for $100,000. Assuming Bitcoin hits $500,000, you could have bought 30 Bitcoin. And then assuming Bitcoin hits $500,000, you could have lived on $700,000 a year, right? And the reason I bring this up is people always feel like it's too late. They feel like it's too late to buy Bitcoin, so they don't want to. They feel like it might fall down in the short term. The problem is, it doesn't really matter what happens in the short term. The key is to dollar cost average, continue to stack Bitcoin over time. Because let me tell you this, if you don't buy Bitcoin, you will never retire on Bitcoin. So you need to start stacking at some point. It's obvious, but it's never going to feel like the right time. Either Bitcoin's up too high or you're worried that's going to fall down more. So what I suggest typically, this isn't financial advice, what I suggest typically is to start buying any amount, right? Let's say you want to buy Bitcoin and eventually you want to be able to get to one full Bitcoin, right? Okay, start with a couple $100. Start with 1% of your portfolio. Start with something, because the hardest thing to do is start. The second hardest thing to do is deal with the volatility. So I'd say start small. Depending on your portfolio, small will mean different things, but start small, but enough that you can feel it. You can feel the volatility. You don't like when it goes down, but you kind of like it because that means you can buy cheaper. Like, feel that volatility, understand it, because after you do that, you'll understand yourself more. You'll be able to dollar cost average heavier if you want to, or maybe you're like, okay, I have enough 1-2% allocation in my portfolio. That makes me feel good enough that I have some Bitcoin without being overly exposed. Some people will only want 1 or 2%. Personally, I have a lot more than that because I'm very bullish on this asset, but I will be taking profits at some point in the future. I dollar cost average throughout the entire bear market. I've been buying for years. I've been paid in Bitcoin. I have lived and breathed Bitcoin for years, and I have a lot of research into this asset. So it might not be right for everyone to do what I'm doing. Let me know your thoughts on this underneath the video. Again, just start with a small amount. Start with a couple $100 if that's what you need to do. And yeah, one day you might not have to invest anymore. If you coast fire, let's say you want to live in Australia, coasting fire at a $2 million Bitcoin is just a quarter of a Bitcoin, which I realize a quarter of a Bitcoin is still a lot right now, right? It's still not like a couple $100. It's still expensive. But when you think about retiring or coasting, right, just being able to sit on that asset for a while until you can retire, that's a really good start. Or maybe 1 Bitcoin, 6.4 Bitcoin to be able to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right? Just know what your goal is. See if it's even achievable, right? If you make a couple $100 a month, you're probably not going to retire on Bitcoin, but maybe you can scale up. Maybe you can invest more in Bitcoin then, right? If you can make more money. So obviously there are more things that go into this than just knowing how much Bitcoin you need, right? You need to actually be able to invest to get to that point. You need to have enough income coming in. Let me know your thoughts though. I appreciate it. Sorry for this video being a little bit longer. Let me know what you think Bitcoin will be at though in 10 years. Let me know if you are on track for your stacking goals. You don't even have to tell me how much Bitcoin you have. That's probably smart to put it out there on the internet, but just let me know if you're on pace for your stacking goals in the comment section below. Also, like I said, there are links to CoinW and to Margex in case you want to start trading cryptocurrencies. It can be a useful part of your plan, I think, for the next bull market, something like low leverage, or maybe you want to time it a little bit more, time bottoms, see where maybe some supports are, and then put in a long, something like that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.